Sir Keir Starmer is set to spell out the importance of rebuilding our defence and resilience today with a commitment to boosting our nuclear weapons. It comes after the biggest defence review in decades.
The government is expected to accept the 62 recommendations of the review, but doubts have been cast over Labour's ability to raise defence spending to 3% of GDP by 2034. Joining us now is Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard. Mr Pollard, starting on the big choice the government is making, there's a report out from the Institute for Fiscal Studies which says even to get defence spending rising to 2.5% of GDP and to invest in the health service, you'll have to have real cuts in spending on local government services, on housing, on the environment, on policing, and that's alongside the welfare reform cuts, which are very controversial. Is it really the right choice to spend more on defence and to cut all these other services that people rely on?
I mean, it's certainly right to spend more on defence. We're seeing more threats to the UK, not just more conventional threats, but more nuclear threats and more cyber threats facing not just our armed forces, but the whole of our society. It's the first duty of any government to keep our country safe, but it's also the first mission of this Labour government to invest in our economy. And that's why we've taken the difficult decision to cut international aid spending, move that money to the defence budget and direct that money at British defence companies. That's not only going to help grow the economy, but it's going to create jobs in every single part of the United Kingdom.
And
that is why defence really can be an engine for growth.
But the IFS report says you're not just cutting international aid, you'll also have to cut in the spending review, spending on housing, policing, local government services, pretty much everything else. So the first duty of government is defending our country. In your view, does that justify cuts in all these other services?
I mean, when the Prime Minister made his decisive and historic defence increase announcement in February this year, he cut international aid spending by 0.2% of GNI and increased defence spending by 0.2% of GDP. That's precisely swapping from one budget to the other. I think it's right that we do this because I think your viewers will have seen the horrendous images coming out of Ukraine. They will know that there's Russian ships patrolling, going through the English Channel that have to be shadowed by Royal Navy warships. They know that we've had Russian ships loitering over our critical national infrastructure. They will know that Russia has used chemical weapons on the streets of Britain in Salisbury. They know that the threats facing our country are increasing. Yeah. And that is precisely why, within weeks of taking office, we commissioned this defence review, and today we're publishing it, setting out how we're going to be investing that increased defence spending in the kit and equipment and people that will keep our country safe.
Just want to talk about whether this is actually going to happen. Because we have the Defence Secretary saying we are going to boost spending to 3% of GDP. And he said that is going to happen in the next Parliament. Yesterday he said it was merely an ambition. And the Treasury said 3% was an ambition when the economic conditions were right. Now, are you all speaking in the same joined-up way? Are we going to be spending 3% of GDP on defence, or are we simply hoping that the economy goes the way we want it to so that at some stage we can?
Well, I think every statement there is consistent with the announcement made by the Prime Minister in February. That's increasing defence spending this year, extra £5 billion in the budget this year, an extra £13.4 billion every year by 2027, and an ambition to increase defence spending to 3% in the next Parliament. And so thanks to the fact that the Chancellor's getting our economy back up.
It's not
a guarantee.
And thanks
to the fact that the Chancellor is getting our... No, it remains an ambition, as set out by the Prime Minister in February this year. So this position has not changed.
So, Mr Pollard, when we report, as we've done, that you're accepting the 62 recommendations of the report, one of the recommendations makes it absolutely clear that getting to 3% is essential, non-negotiable. And you're saying that you're not accepting that, it's just something you'd like to do.
No, the defence review has been based and predicated on increasing defence spending to 2.5% of our GDP, which we will do as we've had additional budgets this year and every year until 2027. But we also have the ambition to increase it to 3% in the next Parliament.
What does the
There's
defence
not a
review
single
say about
serving member
3%?
of any of our armed forces that's got a...
What does the defence review say about 3%?
We will be hitting... We've got that commitment to 2.5%. That's what the defence review is predicated on. Yeah. But we also have that ambition to hit 3% in the next Parliament. But there's not a single member of our armed forces that serving in the military that have had a decade of rising defence spending. Yeah. That is what the Prime Minister set out in February. Okay. That's what this defence review delivers.
No, the trouble is that the defence review specifically mentions the 3%. The government's important decision to raise defence spending to 2.5% by 2027-28 and vitally to 3% in the next Parliament made an enormous difference. The decision established the affordability of our recommendations. It is a critical part, a vital part in the review's words of the recommendations that you have pledged to accept. But you can't guarantee that we're going to be spending 3%. It remains a hope, an ambition, and conditional on the economy.
I mean, the position on this hasn't changed since the Prime Minister first announced it in February. It's the reason why we commissioned this defence review, to reform defence, to invest more of that increased budget with British industry and give our people the kit and equipment they need. It remains the ambition to spend 3% in the next Parliament. And we're doing that because I've got no doubt that we will hit 3% because of the good stewardship of our economy from the Chancellor and because threats are increasing. And that latter point is really important here because the Defence Review sets out how we're going to adjust and update our armed forces to deal with the threats that we're facing. The increase in the number of submarines that are being built in Barrow, up to 12 new hunter-killer submarines, is not just a jobs boost, it helps secure the North Atlantic from Russian threats. The directed energy weapons that are included in the Defence Review that we'll be installing on our Royal Navy destroyers will help them shoot down missiles and drones. And the matching of drone warfare to our land forces, to the British Army, will help increase their lethality. Now, all of those are affordable within the 2.5% that we've set out.
Okay.
We want to go further than that, which is why the Prime Minister set out that ambition to get to 3% in the next Parliament.
But will you use the word of the Defence Review you're publishing today and say to us here and now that getting to 3% in the next Parliament is vital?
I mean, I agree with the reviewers when they've written that down, that the Defence Review, though, is predicated on delivering all of the review within 2.5%.
So will you say to us it's vital?
We can do that.
So will you say to us it's vital to get to 3%?
Well, it's the Defence Reviewers' words, and they say it's vital, and I think that there's strong support for what they're saying. But I've got no doubt that we will be at 3% in the next Parliament because we are getting our economy back on track and because threats are increasing. But what we spend it on is just as important as how much we spend. And that is why the Defence Review sets out more investment in our people, why we've announced £1.5 billion to sort out the scandal of the appalling state of defence accommodation, defence housing with black mould in. It's the reason why we're directing more money from the increased defence budget at British firms, creating jobs in every part of the country. It's precisely that whole approach that we're setting out today.
I wonder whether Vladimir Putin will smile seeing you dancing around with your language here and think, you know, are they really serious?
I'm not certain Vladimir Putin's got you on in the Kremlin, but certainly what he fears the most is our independent nuclear deterrent. He fears the most our independent nuclear deterrent. That's why we're investing further in that in this Defence Review. He fears NATO unity, which is why this Defence Review sets out that we will be a leading member within NATO with a NATO-first approach. He fears the interoperability that this Defence Review will deliver for our armed forces alongside our allies. And he knows that if we don't invest in our stockpiles, it will be easier to threaten us. So that's why this Defence Review provides for more munitions factories, more jobs, and refilling our stockpiles with the latest cutting-edge weaponry that will deter Russian aggression, because that's at the heart of this defence review.
OK.
We don't want war. We need to be ready to fight a war if necessary, but this investment helps deter Russian aggression against not just the United Kingdom, but against our allies, especially those on NATO's eastern flank that border Russia.
You underestimate yourself if you think that Vladimir Putin doesn't listen to what the UK government says. But thank you very much indeed,
Well,
Luke
they certainly
Pollard.
listen to the UK government. I'm not saying they listen to every media interview, but yes,
Yeah,
thank you
I
for your
tell
time.
you, he was listening to it this morning, Mr. Pollard.
He will do. Thank you very much indeed.